student intern of the exciting new project here in Jackson County. I'm here with our host, Mr. Bill Martin. Mr. Martin, please tell our audience here who you are and a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name is Bill Martin. I'm a retired, you can tell I'm pretty well retired. I'm a retired attorney. I have a broad breadth of experience. I started out coming to Jackson in 1979 and set up my shingle, that romantic business where a lawyer comes in and sets up his shingle and tries not to starve. Well, that was I. And I picked up business and I became a judge from 1987 through 1992. My experience includes I've prosecuted, I've defended, I've been a judge, I've represented the city of Jackson from time to time. I've worked in the juvenile court, so a lot of experience as a lawyer. And the one thing that I brought away from that is evidence counts. The truth counts. In the law courts, it's all about evidence. And what we're trying to do here is have a series of conversations, and I hope they'll center about local issues and the way evidence applies. Full disclosure, I have no use for Trump or anything he stands for. However, I think there are a lot of people who voted for Trump who have perfectly legitimate grievances about the way things are going on, and locally as well. And I'd like to explore those if we can. It's no secret, I think, that the Democrat Party got quite a shock last election, and they're going to have to revise their thinking. And part of what I hope to do is assist in revising thinking along the lines of an evidentiary-based conversation.
That's really nice. Now, can you tell us about the Clubhouse and why we're here today?
Sure. During the last election, Lisa Parker, the chairman of the local Democrat Party, spearheaded an effort to try to get a kind of communication which wasn't necessarily print newspapers and not necessarily paid advertisements, but more kind of a social media. And Cash, she used some of your experience, I think, for that, because you know a little bit more about social media than the rest of us. So we managed to get some little pieces out there, and we got on TikTok of all things, and to our surprise, people listened to us. So we thought we'd try it again. The outlets that we're thinking about are Facebook and the Democrat Party site, and also YouTube. Thank you for go ahead and say it off camera. Lisa's there giving a little coaching. So that's what we hope to do with a conversation style presentation. And we hope to publish it on these social media sites and perhaps explore some local issues. And we hope with some just folks that are involved in those issues. One fellow I have in mind to try to get on is a gentleman named Dennis Reinhardt, who's a retired teacher, retired coach, just strong, middle-of-the-road kind of guy. He has a particular interest in nature in Jackson County, and he would like to talk about a park district for Jackson County as something good for the people. So that's the sort of thing that we'll be getting into. We won't spend all our time complaining about the national level. We're more interested in what happens at the local and state levels. Another thing we'll be very interested in is education and schools. It's not beyond the realm of possibility that we would get some high school students, assuming permission from the parents, to come in and talk about, I'm going to sneeze, excuse me, talk about their experiences in the schools and what they think could make things better. So that's kind of our orientation here. And what we did was we set up a separate organization, separate from the political organization. And it's a non-profit corporation called Think for Yourself, Inc. And we leased this space and we set up this studio with your folks' help. And we're off and running. We'll see how it goes.
Now, can you tell me where the concept of a podcast came from? Because it seems like everybody nowadays has a podcast. Why you start one?
Again, it's the technique that we chose to try to get some new thinking about politics. I think that however much I despise Trump and his method of doing things, there are some things out there that resonate with people. For example, there's just a bunch of waste in the government. You would hope the federal government, you'd sit down and you take a look at the line items and you say, this works, this doesn't, this works, this doesn't, and try to fix things up there along that line instead of, well, here's a sledgehammer, let's just smash them all and see what's left. On the local level, it seems to me that with respect to schools, a lot of funding is going to private schools, parochial schools. We don't have very many of those in Jackson County. What about the money for public schools? In Jackson County, we should care about public schools, not only for the football, but also for the academics, for people to get the good education and go where the good jobs are. Back in the old days, Jim Rhodes used to say that if you take any social problem and you massage it long enough, it's going to come out, let's get the jobs. It's jobs that count. For people to be able to have a place to go to earn a living, maintain the dignity, support a family. That's what, in many respects, the country's about. And Aggie and I, my wife Aggie and I, have traveled all over the world. That's what the world's about. People are trying to make a living and do well for their families. And that's what we want to try to figure out better ways to do that here in Jackson County.
So, you are a historian, as evidenced as all the books that you've written. Why should we especially pay attention to 1930s history in Germany?
There's been a lot of talk about the techniques that fellows like Orban in Hungary and Putin in Russia, and we're afraid perhaps Trump in America, with the assistance of rich billionaire oligarchs arranging the government to suit themselves. Prime example, number one, was Germany in the 1930s. This was the country of Beethoven and Schiller, Goethe. These people voted basically for Hitler. He came in as a consequence of becoming the largest party in the Reichstag, and he took it from there. He was able to bully the industrialists, and the industrialists thought maybe they could control him. Some of these behaviors have parallels in the United States today. Now, I'm not saying that Trump is Hitler, far from it. He's not. For one thing, he's not smart enough. But there are some of the techniques that are being used, especially troublesome in my mind, is Elon Musk, this billionaire oligarch we have that is just going willy-nilly through our government. What if he decides he wants to steal some of all this information he has? Is anybody going to stop him? So these are some of the parallels that we have to look to. Don't draw the parallel too strongly, but yet I think it's worthwhile taking a look at the way Nazi Germany came out in the 1930s and draw some parallels there.
What would you say your concerns are with my generation and younger to be, soon to be voters?
Yeah, I can say that with some assurance from my perspective, and that is all this I hear about young folks relying on social media to the extent that they're neglecting personal relationships in their own lives. To me, that is so serious that it might be appropriately labeled a crisis. Young people have always had a difficult time. I've always thought the theory of public school, one of the theories of public school was you toss all kinds of kids together and let them work out how they're going to get along and work out using personal relationships. Lord knows, when I was a high school kid, I was the worst at it there ever was. I was absolute failure in relationships with the opposite sex. I'm always grateful to Aggie that she kind of picked me up and took me along. And I hope I was able to adjust a little bit to that.
I will be an eligible voter for the first time in 2026. I'll be 18 in April. Would you like to know what me and my... Okay. What is this? Wait.
What your generation thinks about.
Would you like to know what me and my friends think about? I don't think about this stuff.
That's a problem.
I'll be 18 eventually. I'm not 18 now. Do you think about this stuff more?
Sometimes, because I'll be 18 in April.
Oh yeah, that's right. He's gonna be 18 in a few months.
What do you do for draft?
I don't know. I
This is what we want to have, is a conversation.
I don't know. I tend not to think about this stuff all too much, especially not in case of a draft. I'm not built for a military life. I'm just not. It's just not me.
Oh, I assure you, Cash, I'm not either. Uncle Sam didn't take a bit of attention to me back in 1969.
I mean,
You were drafted, weren't you?
No, actually, I wasn't drafted. My father was on the draft board, and he says, "You better figure out something because your numbers, you're going to go." This was before the lottery, and he didn't see any way to legitimately keep me out of it, and I didn't either. So I wound up enlisting for 2 years. And because I was an enlistee, they paid attention to my dream sheet, which is the sheet you fill out in initial training as to what you want to be in this man's army. Well, I had already known a gentleman called Art Stevenson, who was a chaplain assistant in the Army. And a chaplain assistant is basically the clerk for the chapel. And if you're clerking for a chapel, you might not end up in combat. I admit that was a large part of what I was doing. I didn't want to shoot anybody, and I didn't want to get shot. So I wound up a chaplain assistant, and I had almost 2 years in the Army. I got an early out for education. And about the Army, since we're there, I've concluded that it was the second best educator in my life. The first best, I still think, was Harvard Law School. But the second was the Army. They knew how to teach you things. They took all kinds of people, all kinds of backgrounds. The melting pot recruitment platoon is exactly correct. That's exactly the way it was. We had kids from the streets of New York. We had Westerners. We had Southerners. We had hicks like me. And the Army told you what they wanted you to do. They showed you what they wanted you to do. They made you do it. And then what you did wrong, they made you redo till you got it right. And then you passed the test on it. That, by the way, is education. And the Army was able to do that with all kinds of people from all kinds of backgrounds in all kinds of ways. And I'll always be grateful for that experience. Also, 1969, Vietnam War. I was not a great fan of the Vietnam War. There was some question in my own mind whether I was going to go into the Army or go to Canada. Well, I went in the Army. And I met an awful lot of wonderful people in the Army, to my surprise. These are not people carrying spears, chucking babies. They're wonderful, hardworking, patriotic, smart people. And we've got 2 of them in the room as I'm sitting here today. So that's my take on the military experience.
have you ever been through an active shooter drill, and do you understand how that feels?
I have not been through an active shooter drill. Strangely enough, as I was exiting the Army at Fort Dix, somebody was careless with a .45 pistol and let off a round and everybody hit the deck. That was an active shooter drill of sorts. But other than that, no, and I can't imagine how frightening it must be for children under 18 years of age who have not fully formed their attitudes and what they want to do in life to have to go through that. And I'm not exactly sure the policies to cope with it. I know Jackson County, talking locally, are strong guns. I'm a gun owner myself. I have dozens of guns I inherited from my father. My brother's an avid hunter. Among other things, he shot an elk with a pistol and brought it down, which is kind of impressive. He also shot a deer with a muzzle-loading rifle, the way they did it 250 years ago. That was kind of impressive. So I have gun use in my family. I myself attended Camp Perry National Guard training as a young man, learned how to shoot a pistol, so I still know how to do that. However, in my opinion, the AR-15 is designed to kill people, and it ought to be restricted to law enforcement and the military. Just plain folks have no business with an AR-15. Unpopular notion, but there it is. I just lay it out.
Do you think, with all the conflicts that we're currently having with China, Russia, even Canada, and Mexico being thrown into the mix, do you think the government will start a draft back up for our future generation?
No, they haven't got the guts. I favor military service for everybody, or some kind of public service for everybody. I think everybody ought to spend 2 years for the service of their country. Maybe they'd learn about how to appreciate it. But I really don't think they will. I think the volunteer army is here to stay.
What are your concerns now compared to when you were 16, when you were my age?
I don't have to worry about girls anymore. Mostly. Well, being retired is so comfortable. You would think, I'm in the fourth quarter, I'm late in the fourth quarter. I ought to be scared. But a lot of what I've been up to is done. I've had my career, successful career. I'm pretty well set in retirement. Don't have any of those worries you guys have. And what I'm trying to do is trying to get a setup so that you guys can go through and get to where you're supposed to go without being cheated of the opportunities that you should have in this rich country.
Well, that's all the time that we have for our first episode. Thank you so much for having me on. And stay tuned for the next episode of Think for Yourself podcast.
Bing, bing, bong, bong, bing, bing.
You can't make this crap up. Earl Buddy Carter's RGA introduced a two-bill titled Red, White, and Blue Land Act of 2025 to enable President Trump's efforts to purchase Greenland and rename it Red, White, and Blue Land, furthering his desire to continue building America's brand new acres. The bill would require the U.S. Geographic Names Informant System to update the name of Greenland for users who access official maps and documents in the United States of America. With the melting sea ice opening up new travel routes through the Arctic, there have been concerns that Russia and China could take advantage of this opportunity and boost their presence across North Atlantic. What does this Denmark say as Greenland as one of its territories? Greenland's current leader, Mute B. Edge.
Easy for you to say, Cash.
I don't
Just
know.
say the dude.
The guy has started his people don't care for this idea and don't want to be Americans. As a response, a Denmarkification petition has been launched collecting over 200,000 signatures calling for Denmark to buy the state of California. The proposed cost, $1 trillion. So much for cutting the costs.
Story number 2. President Donald Trump, on his first day in office, signed an executive order calling for the Gulf of Mexico to be renamed the Gulf of America on federal documents, quote, in recognition of this flourishing economic resource and its critical importance to our nation's economy, close quote. But Trump doesn't have the authority to rename the body of water globally. The signed order tells the Secretary of the Interior, formerly North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, to change the name of the body of water in the country's Geographic Names Information System database within 30 days. The move will trigger all federal agency maps, contracts, and other documents to use the new name when referring to the Gulf, which borders roughly 1,700 miles of coast in each of the United States and Mexico. The Gulf of Mexico is now called the Gulf of America for Google Maps users in the United States, keeping with the terms of President Trump's controversial executive order to rename the body of water. Google made the change. It followed an update site listing for the Gulf in the Geographic Names Information System, a government database run by the Interior Department that includes descriptions and location information for more than 1 million places in U.S. territory. To further complicate the ridiculousness, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum said her government wouldn't rule out filing a civil suit against Google if it maintains its stance of calling the stretch of sea between northeastern Mexico and the southeastern United States the Gulf of America. The area long named the Gulf of Mexico across the world has gained a geopolitical spotlight after President Donald Trump declared he would change the Gulf's name. Sheinbaum, in her morning news conference, said the president's decree is restricted to the continental shelf of the United States because Mexico still controls much of the Gulf. We have sovereignty over our continental shelf, she said. Sheinbaum said that despite the fact that her government sent a letter to Google saying that the company was wrong and that the entire Gulf of Mexico cannot be called the Gulf of America. News that affects you. What's in Ohio Senate Bill 1? Now, this is legislation in the Ohio Senate, not federal, but Ohio. Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Ban. The bill would prohibit diversity, equity, and inclusion in recruiting, training, or offering new scholarships. There is a limited exception for research grants that require DEI. Ban on faculty strikes. Full-time faculty would be banned from striking during contract negotiations. Annual reviews and post-tenure reviews. The bill would require annual evaluations for faculty, including those with tenure. Feedback from students and peers would be included. Poor performance could lead to discipline or firing. That's different from what you ordinarily think of as tenure. No positions on controversial beliefs, and that's a quote mark, controversial beliefs, close quote mark. Higher education institutions could not take a position on any, quote, controversial belief or policy, close quote, which is defined as climate policies, politics, foreign policy, DEI programs, immigration policy, marriage, abortion, or, quote, any belief or policy that is the subject of political controversy, close quote. I have news for the senators. The purpose of a university education is to listen to ideas that you don't agree with and that may be controversial. This is the stupidest thing I've read for a while. Let's get back to the text. Eliminate majors. Universities and colleges would eliminate any undergraduate degree program if fewer than 5 students have earned degrees over 3 years. More trustee power over retrenchment. Retrenchment is when a university eliminates or reduces a major or program, often because of low enrollment. The bill would give university trustees, who are appointed by the governor, more power to decide what happens to students and faculty when a program is eliminated. Might comment that the governor and the governor's appointees may in many cases not have the slightest idea what higher education is supposed to be about. Online syllabi. Professors would be required to post their syllabi online for students, parents, and the public to review. There's nothing wrong with that. Required civics lesson. Students would be required to complete a 3-hour credit course on American civics literacy to graduate. The course would review capitalism and documents like the U.S. Constitution and the Emancipation Proclamation. This is great as far as it goes. And of course, university education also needs to include some places where our nation has lapsed in its aspirations toward constitutionality, such as, for example, race riots and massacres in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Wilmington, North Carolina, and similar places during the latter part of the 19th century, early part of the 20th century. That should be part of a university education as well, and it should be part of the civics course. Back to the text. Shortened terms for university trustees. The bill would reduce the years a university trustee would serve from 9 to 6. Harmless enough, I suppose. Training for university trustees. University trustees would need to attend training on how to do their jobs and the current trends in higher education. Well, I'm awfully frightened of that phrase, current trends in higher education. I wonder if that really means education or if that really means something else. More 3-year degrees. The bill would require the Ohio Department of Higher Education to review whether more degrees can be completed in 3 years instead of 4. Well, that's a fair inquiry, I guess. Ban on gifts, new partnerships with China. The proposed law would prohibit universities and colleges from accepting donations and gifts from China. The bill would also prevent new or renewed partnerships with Chinese programs unless the university can prove it has specific safeguards in place. I remember when, for example, Rio Grande University had programs for exchanges between the United States, Rio Grande, and China. My friend Professor Greg Miller led groups to China. He felt it was good education and should be continued. I agree with him. Finally, 5-year cost summary. Universities and colleges must provide lawmakers with a 5-year summary of their costs as legislators consider their budgets. That's a fair provision. So we can see in this bill that there are some parts that are non-controversial and some parts that look to me like it's covered for political aims instead of educational aims. We should be careful to figure out which is which. Thank you.